Black secretary takes 3 bullets for Korean mafia boss's daughter. What he did next left everyone speechless. 3 gunshots shattered the symphony of laughter inside Seoul's most elite ballroom. A waiter's tray crashed to the floor because he was never a waiter. His target wasn't the billionaire host. It was his 16-year-old daughter. And between that gun and the girl stood the one person no one ever saw. Zora Washington. The black secretary everyone ignored. The woman hired to fetch coffee and disappear. She didn't think. She moved. Steel met flesh. Fireworks of pain exploded across her body. 3 bullets, 3 heartbeats. As she threw herself over the child. In a single heartbeat, the room learned that the invisible woman wasn't what she seemed, and the man who ruled half of Seoul's underworld was about to owe her his life. If that moment already grabbed you, hit that like button, tell us where you're watching from, and stay to see what Kang Jae-hoon does when he discovers who Zora Washington really is. The moment Zora Washington stepped into Yunghwa Tower, she knew she was invisible. Not literally, her tall frame and dark skin made her stand out in Seoul's financial district, but in that way that powerful people perfect, looking through someone rather than at them. For 8 months, she'd been merely the black secretary to Kang Jae-hoon, head of the Kang Group. 8 months of yes, sir, and right away, sir, in perfect Korean that surprised everyone the first time, then became expected. 8 months of organizing meetings where deals worth billions were struck, some legal, many not. 8 months of watching, waiting, observing the man responsible for, but I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand what it's like to be seen as nothing more than furniture with a pulse. Harvard education, irrelevant. Military background, unmentioned. The fact that Zora spoke 4 languages fluently and could quote Korean poetry that most natives had forgotten. Merely a party trick when Kang needed to impress foreign associates. A well-trained dog performing on command. There's a unique kind of rage that builds when you're simultaneously essential and invisible. When you're the only one who remembers everyone's coffee preferences, security protocols, and family birthdays, yet no one remembers your name. Hey you, or Kang's woman, or most cutting, nothing at all. Just a snap of fingers or a gestured command. In those moments, Zora would feel the anger burning in her gut. A familiar companion that had driven her across the world to this gleaming tower of steel and secrets. But she swallowed it down. Buried it beneath perfectly pressed blouses and impeccable manners. Used it as fuel for the long game she was playing. Because invisibility, she'd learned, was also power. The power to move unnoticed. To access files left carelessly open on desks. To overhear conversations people wouldn't have if they remembered you existed. That Wednesday evening at the Eternal Foundation Charity Gala, Zora stood 3 paces behind Kang Jae-hoon as always, watching the room while her boss charmed potential investors. The elegant ballroom of the Grand Hyatt sparkled with Seoul's elite, business tycoons, politicians, celebrities, all orbiting Kang like planets around a sun. Not just any sun, a star that burned people who came too close without offering something of value. Min-seo, Kang's 16-year-old daughter, looked painfully out of place. Unlike her father, who moved through the crowd with practiced ease, she stood awkwardly by the dessert table, tugging at her designer dress like it was made of thorns. She hadn't wanted to come. Zora had heard her pleading that morning. But Kang insisted. Family image matters, he'd said. Even for a man who controlled half of Seoul's underworld. Zora had watched Min-seo grow from a shy 14-year-old to the quiet, bookish 16-year-old, who now stood isolated in a room full of people. She'd seen her flinch at her father's rare displays of temper. Seen her shoulders slump when Kang canceled their dinner plans for business emergencies. Seen her face light up on the rare occasions her father actually noticed her accomplishments. She'd noticed these things because no one else seemed to. Not her private tutors, not the household staff, certainly not Kang himself. Zora noticed the security flaw immediately. 3 of Kang's men by the main entrance. 2 watching the service corridor. None with clear sightlines to Min-seo. A blind spot. She'd mentioned it twice in security briefings, only to be dismissed by Kang's head of security. The black woman should stick to scheduling appointments, he'd sneered. The casual racism and sexism had stung less than the dismissal of a legitimate security concern. How many times had her warnings gone unheeded in her life? How many times had she seen the danger coming while others looked away? When the first shot rang out, time compressed into milliseconds of pure instinct. The waiter, not a waiter at all, dropping his tray. Hand reaching inside his jacket. Gun emerging. Aimed not at Kong, but at his daughter. Minacio frozen in confusion. A deer in headlights, strawberry tart halfway to her mouth. And Zora already moving, already calculating trajectory and distance, already knowing what 3 bullets would feel like tearing through flesh that was never meant to stop them. The first hit her shoulder, spinning her half around. The second punched through her lower back, a supernova of agony that nearly dropped her. The third caught her high in the chest as she wrapped herself around Minacio, both of them falling behind the dessert table in a tangle of limbs and blood-soaked formal wear. Pain isn't a strong enough word for what comes next. It's a universe of sensation that erases everything else. Your body becomes a betrayal, every nerve screaming information you don't want to receive. Zora had been shot before, during her third tour. A flesh wound that left a puckered scar on her thigh. But nothing like this. This was drowning in fire. This was every cell in her body simultaneously trying to live and die. Through the fog of it, Zora was aware of Minacio's terrified face above hers. Her hands pressing against Zora's wounds in desperate, futile attempts to hold her life inside her body. Her tears falling onto Zora's face as she screamed for her father. The chaos around them as security finally eliminated the threat. And then Kang Jae-hoon's face, usually a mask of cool calculation, transformed by something Zora had never seen there before. Raw, unfiltered fear. Not for himself, for his daughter. And then, unexpectedly, for the woman bleeding out to save her. "Stay with me," Kang commanded in Korean, as if Zora's fading consciousness would obey like her other orders. "Why would you?" he began but couldn't finish. Zora tried to speak, to explain that it was just instinct, just training, just being in the right place at the wrong time. But all that came out was blood. She wanted to say so many things in that moment. About the evidence she'd been gathering. About her real reason for taking this job. About her sister. About how, despite everything, she'd grown to care for the quiet, lonely girl now sobbing over her. The last thing she heard before darkness claimed her was Minacio's voice, breaking with emotion. "Father, please don't let her die. Please." She saw the gun when no one else did. She saw what no one else did. The irony wasn't lost on Zora as she slipped away. For once, the invisible woman had been the only one really looking. If those 3 bullets shocked you, hit that like button right now. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And subscribe for the jaw-dropping moment that comes next when Kang realizes who Zora really is. Zora Washington should have died on the ballroom floor of the Grand Hyatt Seoul. 3 bullets at close range. Major blood loss. Collapsed lung. The kind of injuries that fill morgues, not recovery rooms. But Kang Jae-hoon hadn't built his empire by accepting probability. While surgeons fought to save his secretary's life, Kang was fighting a different battle with truth. In his private hospital waiting room, he scrolled through the personnel file he should have read 8 months ago. The file his head of human resources had flagged as exceptional before Kang dismissed it with, "Just find me someone efficient who won't ask questions." Now, those unread details burned through his consciousness like acid. Zora Washington, 34. Born in Oakland, California. Bachelor's degree in international relations from Stanford. Master's from Harvard Kennedy School. Fluent in Korean, Japanese, Mandarin, and Russian. 6 years with U.S. Army intelligence. Specialized training in close protection and threat assessment. Honorable discharge with multiple commendations for actions under fire. Not the resume of a secretary. The question hammered Kang's temples. Why would a woman with these qualifications take a position so far beneath her? Why work as an assistant to a Korean business magnate with well-known underworld connections? The obvious answer made Kang's blood freeze. Infiltration. Monitoring. Information gathering. Was she FBI? Interpol? A corporate spy for a rival organization? But spies don't take bullets for their target's children. Junho, Kang's head of security and right-hand man for 20 years, entered the waiting room with the surveillance footage Kang had demanded. They watched in silence as the attack replayed on Junho's tablet. "Look at her eyes," Kang said, rewinding to the moment before the first shot. She identified the threat 4 seconds before it materialized. My entire security team missed it. Junho's face tightened. "Sir, with respect." "Respect." Kang's voice cut like a blade. "Your respect nearly cost me my daughter today. Your respect left a blind spot in our security that a first-year cadet would have identified. A blind spot my secretary warned you about twice." The tablet cracked in Kang's grip. "My secretary. A woman I've treated like furniture for 8 months. A woman whose name some of you can't even bother to remember." The surgeon entered before Junho could respond. His scrubs spattered with blood. "She's stable, Mr. Kang. The next 24 hours will be critical, but if she makes it through the night, her chances are good. She's young, remarkably fit. She will have the best care," Kang said. "Not a request. A statement of immutable fact." "There's something else," the surgeon added hesitantly. "The scars. Your secretary has extensive scarring consistent with previous gunshot wounds and shrapnel. At least 2 separate incidents. This isn't the first time she's been shot." Kang dismissed the surgeon, then turned to Junho. "Effective immediately, Zora Washington is no longer my secretary. When she wakes up, she will be my personal advisor on security matters and special projects." Junho's eyes widened. "Sir, the organization won't accept an outsider in such a position. An American, a black woman. The other families will see it as weakness. Then they fundamentally misunderstand what happened today." Kang's voice was deadly quiet. "This woman stepped in front of bullets meant for my child while my supposedly elite security team failed at their one job. If the organization sees that as weakness, then perhaps the organization needs a painful reminder of what I do to those who question my judgment. The council will accept my decision or face consequences. Prepare the announcement." And Junho, Kang's eyes were cold as a Siberian winter. "Find out why Zora Washington really came to work for me. I want to know what she's been looking for these past 8 months. And who sent her." In Minasio's private hospital room, Kang found his daughter sitting silently beside her bodyguard. Not the one assigned to her, but an elderly housekeeper who had helped raise her since her mother's death. Minasio's designer dress had been replaced with hospital scrubs, but nothing could wash away the haunted look in her eyes. "Zora will live," Kang said, and watched as relief transformed his daughter's face. "She saved me," Minacio whispered. "She didn't even hesitate." "I know. You never saw her, Appa. None of you did. She's been invisible to all of you." There was accusation in her voice that Kang had never heard before. "But she sees everything. She noticed when my grades improved. She remembered my birthday when you were in Tokyo. She leaves books on my desk, history books about strong women. She thinks no one knows." Kang felt something unfamiliar twist in his chest. Shame. His daughter, his brilliant, observant daughter, had seen what he had not. Had valued what he had dismissed. Had recognized humanity where he had seen only function. "Things will be different when she wakes up," Kang promised. Minacio studied her father with eyes too wise for her 16 years. "Will they? Or will you just find a different way to use her?" The question hit harder than Kang expected. Because using people was what he did. It was how he'd built everything he had. Everyone was a resource to be leveraged. Even his own flesh and blood, pushed into public appearances she hated because image mattered in their world. "She won't be invisible anymore," Kang said finally. "I give you my word." Words Kang Jae-hoon did not speak lightly. Words that would reshape the destiny of everyone involved. Words that would start a war. Zora Washington woke up to the unfamiliar sensation of Egyptian cotton sheets and the distant beeping of medical monitors. Not the standard-issue hospital room she expected, but a private suite that screamed wealth and privilege. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's skyline. She wasn't alone. 3 centimeters to the left, and we wouldn't be having this conversation, Kang Jae-hoon said from an armchair beside the bed. Not in his usual impeccable suit, but casual clothes Zora had never seen him wear. 3 days' worth of stubble darkened his jaw. Zora tried to speak, found her throat raw and uncooperative. Water, Kang offered, already pouring from a crystal pitcher. The role reversal was jarring. For 8 months, Zora had poured Kang's water, scheduled his meetings, stood silently in corners waiting to be useful. Now Kang Jae-hoon, the winter dragon of Seoul's underworld, was holding a straw to her lips. The water was cool relief against the sandpaper of her throat, but the situation felt like some bizarre fever dream. Pain medication, Zora thought, had to be. Or perhaps she died after all, and this was some strange purgatory where the natural order was inverted. Minesio, Zora managed after the blessed relief of water. Physically unharmed. Emotionally, Kang set the glass down. She refuses to leave the hospital. Sleeps in the room next door. Insists on being here when you wake up. Relief washed through Zora, dulling even the persistent throb of her wounds. The mission parameters hadn't changed. The girl was still alive, still safe. That part, at least, she hadn't failed. I've been reading your file, Ms. Washington, Kang continued, and Zora felt ice replace the blood in her veins. Harvard, military intelligence, closed protection training, multiple commendations for valor under fire. Not exactly the resume of a secretary. The moment Zora had both anticipated and dreaded for 8 months had arrived. Exposure. The careful cover identity peeled away like a bandage, exposing raw truth underneath. So, Kang leaned forward, elbows on knees. I have questions. I imagine you do. Zora's voice was a rasp, but her mind was racing through contingencies, exit strategies, the odds of surviving this conversation. Let's start with an easy one. Why would a woman with your qualifications take a position so far beneath her? The rehearsed cover story rose automatically to Zora's lips. Student loans, a difficult job market for veterans, a personal interest in Korean culture. But staring into Kang's penetrating gaze, she made a split-second decision that would alter everything. I wanted to be invisible, Zora said. Not the whole truth, but not a lie either. Something flickered across Kang's face. Recognition, perhaps. Understanding. And why would a woman like you want to be invisible, Ms. Washington? Invisible people see things others miss. Like a security vulnerability at a charity gala? Like that, yes. Kang was silent for a long moment, studying Zora with new eyes. Not the dismissive glance of an employer to subordinate, but the wary respect of one predator recognizing another. Whoever sent you, Kang said finally, didn't expect you to take bullets for my daughter. No one sent me. This at least wasn't a lie. Not entirely. The journey that had brought Zora to that ballroom, to that moment of violence and sacrifice, had begun with her own pain, her own mission, her own need for answers in a world that had taken too much from her already. Then why? The door burst open, and Minesio rushed in, ignoring her father's disapproving frown. You're awake, she exclaimed, relief flooding her face. The nurses told me your vitals changed. I knew you'd wake up today. I just knew it. She looked different from the awkward teenager at the gala. Stronger somehow, more present. Trauma did that sometimes, sharpen people to their essential selves. Stripped away pretense and social niceties, leaving only core truths. Zora had seen it in combat zones, in the eyes of survivors. Had felt it reshape her own soul after. Minesio, we were discussing. Business. Always business. Minesio cut her father off, something Zora had never witnessed before. She just woke up after saving my life, Appa. Your questions can wait. To Zora's astonishment, Kang yielded, rising from his chair with a nod. We'll continue our conversation later, Ms. Washington. In the meantime, my daughter has something to tell you. After Kang left, Minesio took his place, perching on the edge of the chair with nervous energy. "He's making you his personal advisor," she blurted out. "Security consultant and special projects, whatever that means. Everyone's talking about it. The other families are furious. Uncle Junho looks like he swallowed a lemon." Zora's mind reeled. Personal advisor? To a man whose organization she'd spent months investigating? Whose secrets she'd been quietly cataloging? Whose destruction she'd... "I told him he should," Minacio continued, oblivious to her inner turmoil. "I said it was stupid to have someone like you fetching coffee and making appointments. I've seen you reading his security reports when you thought no one was looking. I've heard you speaking all those languages on the phone. You're not just a secretary. You never were." The accusation, though softly spoken, landed like a physical blow. Zora had underestimated this girl, mistaking her quiet demeanor for obliviousness. She'd been watching Zora as carefully as Zora had been watching her father. "Why did you do it?" Minacio asked, her voice small. "Why did you save me? You could have just yelled a warning. You could have pushed me down. You didn't have to." "Take the bullets?" Zora finished when she trailed off. "I didn't think about it. Training kicks in. You see the threat, you neutralize it or contain it. There wasn't time for anything else. That's not secretary training." "No," Zora admitted. "It's not." Minacio stared at her, really looking, in that unfiltered way teenagers had before they learned society's polite fictions. "You hate him, don't you?" "My father." The question hit with the force of a fourth bullet. Unexpected. Devastating in its simplicity. "I don't know your father," Zora said carefully. "That's not a denial." Minacio's eyes, so like her father's, saw too much. "You work for him, but you watch him like you're waiting for something. Like you're counting his sins. Everyone has reasons for the choices they make." Zora felt sweat beating on her forehead despite the room's perfect temperature. "Your father is a complicated man. He's a monster sometimes," Minacio said matter-of-factly. "I know what he does. What our family does. I'm not stupid." "No," Zora agreed. "You're definitely not that. But he loves me. And now he respects you. That's rare, Zora. He doesn't even respect Uncle Junho anymore. And they've been friends since military service." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Whatever you came here to do, whatever your real reason is, please don't hurt him. He's all I have." The plea, so earnest and vulnerable, carved something open inside Zora's chest that had nothing to do with bullet wounds. This girl, this perceptive, resilient child, had seen through her with ease, had recognized the anger that had driven her halfway across the world, the rage that had sustained her through 8 months of invisibility and disrespect. And still, knowing something of her intent, she'd chosen to ask for mercy rather than expose her. "I took 3 bullets for you, Minacio," Zora said softly. "I think that changes the equation, don't you?" She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her solemn face. "I think it changes everything. Would you risk everything for someone who never truly saw you before? Drop a comment below and tell us what you'd do in Zora's position. Hit subscribe now because the connection between Zora and Eugene is about to take a turn nobody saw coming. Like this video if you're Team Zora. 2 weeks after taking 3 bullets that were never meant for her, Zora Washington attended her first executive meeting as Kang Jae-hoon's personal advisor. The boardroom fell silent as she entered, 11 pairs of eyes tracking her movements with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Gone was the nondescript suit of a secretary. Today Zora wore tailored charcoal gray that subtly matched Kang's own attire, a visual cue that wasn't lost on anyone present. The pain in her chest was a constant companion, a physical reminder of how quickly life could change. Each breath was a negotiation with damaged tissue. Each movement required calculation. But Zora had learned long ago that showing weakness in rooms like this was tantamount to suicide. "Gentlemen," Kang said, taking his seat at the head of the table, "I believe you all know Ms. Washington." Scattered nods. A few murmured greetings. One contemptuous snort from Minchul, head of distribution for the Kong Group's less legitimate enterprises. As of today, Ms. Washington will be overseeing a comprehensive security review of all our operations. You will provide her with whatever information she requests. Your full cooperation is not optional. The tension in the room thickened to something you could cut with a knife. These men, Kang's inner circle, were accustomed to autonomy within their divisions. They answered to Kong alone, guarded their territories jealously, and shared information only when absolutely necessary. Now they were being asked to open their books to an outsider, an American, a black woman who, until 2 weeks ago, had been bringing them coffee. With respect, sir, Min Chul began. His tone suggesting respect was the furthest thing from his mind. Some of our operations are sensitive. Information is compartmentalized for everyone's protection. Are you suggesting, Kong replied with dangerous softness, that my judgment is flawed, Min Chul? Not at all, sir. But the other families aren't sitting in this room. Kang's hand came down on the table with controlled violence. The other families didn't allow an assassin to get within 10 feet of my daughter. The other families aren't responsible for the largest security breach in our organization's history. Min Chul's face darkened, but he said nothing more. Ms. Washington has my complete confidence, Kong continued, his voice level again. Her unique perspective has already identified vulnerabilities we've overlooked. Anyone who obstructs her work answers directly to me. The message was clear. Zora's position was non-negotiable. Any resistance would be seen as a direct challenge to Kang's authority, a challenge few survived. The rest of the meeting proceeded with strained politeness. Operational updates, financial reports, territory disputes. The familiar rhythm of an organization that straddled the line between corporate empire and criminal syndicate. Zora observed, absorbing details, connecting dots, building on the knowledge she'd accumulated during her months of invisible observation. She was also acutely aware of the empty chair to Kang's left, the seat traditionally reserved for family representatives during business discussions. Min Seo was too young, and Kong had no living siblings or trusted cousins to fill the role. In Korean business culture, especially in organizations with traditional roots, this absence was a visible weakness. A man with no family was vulnerable, replaceable. The doors opened halfway through the financial report, and the room's atmosphere shifted instantly. Eugene Park entered like she owned the building, which technically her family did own at least 30% of through various shell corporations. Slim and elegant in a charcoal suit nearly identical to Zora's, with sharp bangs framing a face that graced fashion magazines despite her family's attempts at privacy. The representative of the Park family, Kang's closest allies and occasional rivals in Seoul's complex underworld. She moved with the casual confidence of someone born into power, raised to wield it without question or apology. No trace of the awkward self-consciousness that plagued Min Seo. No hint of doubt about her right to be in this room of dangerous men. Ms. Park, Kong acknowledged, showing no surprise at her unannounced arrival. We weren't expecting you until next week's joint venture discussion. Plans change, she replied coolly, taking the empty family chair without invitation. My father sends his regrets for the incident at the gala. We've been conducting our own investigation. Her eyes flickered to Zora, assessing, calculating. This must be the hero of the hour, the secretary who became indispensable overnight. We've heard much about you, Ms. Washington. The way she said secretary made it sound like spy. Ms. Park, Zora nodded politely. Your reputation precedes you as well. It did. Eugene Park, 32, heir apparent to the Park Group. MBA from Wharton. Ruthless negotiator. Rumored to have personally handled 3 traitors within her family's organization. Handled being the operative euphemism for something best not discussed in polite company. Beautiful and lethal in equal measure. Her file had been one of the first Zora had memorized after taking the position with Kong. Know your allies, her sister had always said, because they're the ones with the best opportunity to betray you. The thought of Nora sent a familiar pang through her, sharper than the pain of her healing wounds. Does it? Eugene's smile didn't reach her eyes. How fascinating that a foreign administrative assistant would know anything about me at all. I make it my business to know things. Zora held her gaze. Just as I suspect you make it yours, Miss Park. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, perhaps, that Zora didn't look away or defer as most people did in her presence. Indeed I do, Ms. Washington. She turned to Kong. For instance, I know that the shooter at the gala was Kim Ji-won, formerly employed by the Han family's security detail until 3 months ago, when he supposedly retired to Busan. Except he never arrived in Busan, did he? Instead, he received 3 payments of 50 million Korean wons each from an offshore account linked to proxy servers in Singapore. She placed a slim folder on the table. My family's contribution to your investigation, Mr. Kong. We have mutual interests in discovering who would be so bold or so stupid as to target your daughter. Kong opened the folder, scanned its contents with an impassive face that nonetheless couldn't quite hide his surprise at the thoroughness of the information. This is comprehensive, Ms. Park. My thanks to your father. Don't thank us yet. Eugene's perfectly manicured nail tapped the folder. The final page contains a name you'll recognize. Someone in this room has been feeding information to the Han family for at least 6 months. Security protocols, family schedules, financial vulnerabilities. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Heads swiveled as executives looked at one another with sudden suspicion. If these allegations are true, Kong began. They are, Eugene interrupted. We have electronic records, witness statements, and financial transfers that support everything in that file. Then why bring this to me now? Why not earlier? Eugene's eyes slid to Zora again. Let's call it professional curiosity. I wanted to see what kind of woman takes 3 bullets for someone else's child, then accepts a promotion from someone she was almost certainly investigating. The room went utterly still. Every eye turned to Zora. That's quite an accusation, Ms. Park, Zora said, her voice even despite the adrenaline now coursing through her system. Is it an accusation if it's demonstrably true? Eugene countered. Harvard Kennedy School graduates with military intelligence backgrounds don't typically seek employment as secretaries, Ms. Washington. Especially not to men like Kang Jae-hoon. So the question becomes, who are you really working for? The Americans? Interpol? Or perhaps one of Mr. Kang's domestic competitors? Kang's expression had hardened to granite, unreadable even to Zora who'd spent months studying every micro-expression. You seem very interested in Ms. Washington's motivations, Eugene. Almost suspiciously so. I'm interested in anomalies, she replied smoothly. They often indicate larger problems. And Ms. Washington is nothing if not anomalous. Zora felt the weight of her choices pressing down like a physical force. The careful cover story, the months of information gathering, the real reason she'd sought employment with Kang Jae-hoon. All of it balanced on a knife's edge. She thought of her sister, her face drawn and serious on their last video call. I'm close, Zora, she'd said. Close to something big. Something that connects all the way to the top. I just need a little more time. 3 days later, she'd disappeared. 3 weeks of frantic searching, calling in every favor, using every contact from her military days. Nothing. Nora had vanished without a trace. Until that cryptic message 6 months later. A single line of Korean text from an anonymous sender. Kang Jae-hoon knows. You're right, she said finally, addressing Eugene but looking at Kang. I didn't apply for a secretarial position because I needed work or admired Korean corporate culture. I came looking for something specific. The room seemed to hold its collective breath. You came looking for me? A new voice interrupted from the doorway. Minacio stood there, still pale from her ordeal but steel in her spine. The executives rose automatically. Even in the underworld, certain courtesies remained sacred. Ms. Kong. Eugene inclined her head with practiced respect. This is a private business meeting. Concerning a threat to my life, Minacio countered, moving to stand beside Zora. Which makes it very much my business, Ms. Park. She placed a hand on Zora's shoulder. A gesture of support but also possession. A clear signal to everyone present. This woman is under my protection. Zora came here looking for me, Minacio repeated. Because my mother asked her to before she died. The shock that rippled through the room was almost audible. Kang's face drained of color. What are you talking about? He demanded. Your mother died in a car accident 6 years ago. Did she? Minacio's voice was steady, though her hand trembled slightly on Zora's shoulder. Or was that just what was easiest for everyone to believe? For the first time since Zora had known him, Kang Jae-hoon looked genuinely shaken. Minacio, this isn't the place. It's exactly the place. Minacio cut him off. In front of your loyal men and our supposed allies. So everyone can hear the truth at once. She took a deep breath. My mother faked her death because someone in the organization was trying to kill her. She's been living in America under an assumed name, protected by people she trusted. People like Zora's sister, who served with the diplomatic security service in Seoul. They became friends. When Mom got sick, really sick with the cancer that finally killed her last year, she asked Zora to find me, to watch over me from a distance, to make sure I was safe. Zora closed her eyes briefly, the weight of secrets finally lifting. Not the whole truth. Minacio was improvising wildly, creating a cover story on the fly that explained her presence without revealing her actual purpose. Clever girl. Far cleverer than anyone in this room gave her credit for. The pain of her sister's absence hit anew. What would Nora think of this moment? Of the tangled web of half-truths and clever deceptions they were spinning? Would she approve of the direction her investigation had taken? Of the bullets Zora had intercepted for a girl she'd come to care for despite herself? Sophia wasn't trying to escape me, Kang said, his voice hollow. She was trying to escape someone in the organization? Yes. Minacio nodded. Someone she believed was working with the Han family even back then. Someone close to you. This is absurd, Minchul broke in. We're expected to believe this fantasy based on what? The word of a child and a woman who infiltrated our organization under false pretenses. You're questioning my daughter's word? Kang's shock was rapidly transforming to fury. You dare suggest she would lie about her mother? I'm suggesting she's been manipulated. Minchul backpedaled hastily. This foreigner has obviously gained her trust for her own purposes. By taking 3 bullets for her? Zora asked quietly. Interesting manipulation strategy. Nearly fatal but interesting. The sarcasm slipped out before she could stop it. A glimpse of the real Zora Washington behind the careful facade of the perfect secretary or the polished security advisor. The woman whose anger had simmered for years. Fuel for a mission of truth that had led her to this moment. The file, Eugene interjected, tapping it again. Perhaps we should focus on the evidence at hand. The traitor in your organization, Mr. Kang. The same traitor who may have forced your wife into hiding 6 years ago. Kang opened the folder again, turned to the last page. His expression transformed from grief to murderous rage in the space of a heartbeat. Min Chul, he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Would you care to explain why your personal account received 100 million Korean wons the day before the attempt on my daughter's life? Min Chul's face went ashen. Sir, I can explain. I sincerely hope so. Kang nodded almost imperceptibly, and 2 security guards materialized behind Min Chul's chair. You'll have plenty of opportunity while my men ask you detailed questions about your relationship with the Han family. Whether you'll have the opportunity to answer those questions with all your extremities intact depends entirely on how truthful I find your initial responses. As Min Chul was escorted out, his protestations already fading to please, Eugene gathered her things with the satisfied air of someone who'd accomplished exactly what they came to do. My father will be pleased to hear you're addressing this breach, Mr. Kang, she said. Our family's alliance depends on mutual trust and security. She paused beside Zora on her way out. I look forward to working more closely with you, Ms. Washington. I have so many questions about your qualifications. The threat beneath the professional veneer wasn't subtle. Neither was the undercurrent of interest in her voice that had nothing to do with business. Zora had seen that look before, the calculating assessment of someone who saw people primarily as assets or liabilities. It was a complication she didn't need. After the meeting dispersed, Zora found herself alone with Kong and Minacio in the suddenly cavernous boardroom. That wasn't the complete truth, Kong said. Not a question but a statement. No, Zora admitted. But it was close enough. My wife, Sophia. Did you really know her? Not personally, no. Kong nodded slowly, absorbing this. But you're here because of her in some way. Because of what happened to her. Zora met his gaze steadily. Yes. Tell me. And so Zora told him. Not everything. Some truths were still too dangerous, too raw, but enough. About Sophia Kim, who'd fled not just her marriage but mortal danger. About evidence she'd gathered implicating high-level members of the Kong organization in human trafficking operations that went far beyond the usual underworld activities. About a USB drive containing names, dates, bank accounts, evidence that had gone missing after her death. Evidence Zora had been searching for during her 8 months as an invisible secretary with access to Kang's private files. She told Kong about Nora's investigation into the same trafficking ring. How she'd made contact with someone claiming to have information about Sophia Kim's evidence. How she disappeared 3 days later, her apartment cleaned out as if she'd never existed. What she didn't tell Kong was about the nightmares. The ones where she saw Nora's face, heard her screaming for help while Zora stood frozen, unable to reach her. The ones that drove her from sleep night after night in her sterile soul apartment. The ones that fueled the rage and purpose that had sustained her through months of invisibility and disrespect. And yet, Kong said when Zora finished, you took bullets for my daughter. Why? If you believe I was involved in these activities, if you think I might have been involved in forcing my own wife into hiding, why save Minacio? Because she's innocent, Zora said simply. And because I made a promise. To my dead wife. To myself. Zora looked at Minacio, who'd been silent throughout her explanation, that I wouldn't become the kind of person who lets children die to settle old scores. Minacio's eyes brimmed with tears. You still think he knew? That my father was part of it? I don't know, Zora admitted. That's why I came. To find out. Kang's face was a study in controlled anguish. I loved my wife, Ms. Washington. Whatever you may think of me, whatever crimes you believe I've committed, I loved Sophia with everything I am. If she was in danger, if she felt she had to run, his voice broke. I failed her, but I will not fail my daughter. He rose, straightened his jacket with mechanical precision. You will continue as my advisor. You will help me find every person involved in these trafficking operations. You will help me dismantle whatever caused my wife to flee. And then, perhaps, I will decide whether to kill you for your deception or thank you for your service. With that, he left, his normally confident stride slightly unsteady. Minacio remained, studying Zora with eyes too old for her face. You didn't tell him everything. No. There's more to why you're here. Something personal. Zora sighed, feeling the pull of her healing wounds. Your mother wasn't the only one who disappeared, Minacio. My sister was investigating the same trafficking ring. She vanished 3 years ago in Seoul. Her last communication was about your mother's evidence. Understanding dawned in Minacio's eyes. So you came looking for answers about your sister. And instead found. Instead, I found a teenage girl who reads history books about strong women. Who struggles with her father's expectations. Who notices when the invisible people in her life do small kindnesses. Zora smiled tiredly. Complications. I found complications. The anger that had driven her halfway across the world hadn't disappeared. The pain of her sister's absence hadn't lessened. But somehow, impossibly, they'd been joined by something else. Something that felt dangerously like connection. Like purpose beyond vengeance. Minacio stepped closer, determination replacing the earlier tears. We'll find out what happened to them. Both of them. My father has resources, connections. And now he has you. And Eugene Park? You think we can trust her information? No, Minesio said with surprising firmness. The Parks never do anything without multiple angles. She wants something. We just don't know what yet. She's dangerous. So are you, Minesio pointed out. So is my father. So am I in my way. She squared her shoulders. You protected me, Zora. Now let me protect you. Let me help you find your sister. Looking at her determined face, Zora saw echoes of the mother she barely remembered. The same quiet strength. The same moral compass that had led Sophia Kim to gather evidence against a criminal empire, even at the cost of leaving her child behind. Okay, she agreed. Partners. Minesio smiled, and for a moment looked exactly her age. A teenager with braces who'd found an unexpected ally in a world of sharks. Partners, she agreed. Now let's go see what Ms. Park really wants with you. Because that look she gave you wasn't just professional interest. Minesio. What? I'm 16, not blind. She headed for the door, pausing to look back at Zora with mischief replacing some of the earlier gravity. Besides, we need to practice our story about how my mother secretly sent you to protect me. We'd better get our details straight before Eugene starts poking holes in it. As Zora followed her out, she felt something she hadn't experienced in the 3 years since her sister's disappearance. Hope. Fragile and dangerous, but hope nonetheless. The invisible woman was finally being seen, and the world would never be the same. If the story of sacrifice and unexpected family moved you, smash that like button right now. Have you ever witnessed someone step up when it mattered most? Share your story in the comments below. Subscribe and hit that notification bell because our next story about an underestimated hero will leave you in tears. From Korea to wherever you're watching, we thank you for being part of our story family.